All right, word students, welcome back. This is, I don't know why I called it Words Lecture 2. I'm sure I did that for my own personal reasons. Technically, this is going to be the fourth lecture of the Words course, but it is the second kind of group of lectures, and it is focused on chapter 1 of our textbook. So we're just using words in all kind of ways, just showing how different things can signify different things. There's just different, anyhow. So thank you for your patience with this oddly titled slideshow. But we are definitely talking about chapter 1 of our textbook today, which means that unlike the introductory series of lectures, which were about the introduction, and thus we're focused on more history and more kind of language theory, this lecture is going to look much more like all of the other lectures I'm going to have for this course, which means that you're going to be seeing many just more words. We're going to be talking about word stems today, or roots, if you will. We're going to be talking about prefixes. We're going to be talking about suffixes. There is going to be a poem in this lecture, though, so lest you were concerned that there won't be some sort of utterly not necessary bit of language talking, this lecture has that as well. So let us not delay, but move ahead. So here are our learning objectives for this lecture and the two that are going to follow it. We are going to, there's the things we really need to do now are agree on some basic terminology. And there's one word in particular that I strongly disagree with the book on. So we're going to talk about that and we'll get it all squared away because this will be the vocabulary we're using throughout the rest of the course. Then we are going to start talking about, amazingly, Latin nouns and adjectives. Now, I have to be careful with this because this is something I could literally talk about for 33 weeks, and I actually do that every single academic year. We're going to have a very quick and dirty introduction to Latin nouns and adjectives. It'll be fine. It'll be short. Don't worry about it. I'm talking to myself. Don't worry about it. I'm going to be fine. And then we're going to focus on some suffixes. We're not learning any prefixes in this chapter. We're just going to learn some of the suffixes that are really important. And the thing to focus on with suffixes, in my opinion, is mainly just if they create nouns or if they create adjectives. I think that's the most useful way of understanding suffixes. So yeah, we'll look at some of those, and then we will finally put some words together and we'll start to build up our vocabulary. Okay, but first, just to review, because our chapter 1 includes this information, and in case you skipped over the introduction and thought I don't need to know this ever, here's just a brief reminder that it's so important and interesting. So here's a review of the history of English. We start with Old English, which had this kind of Latin grammatical, syntactical structure, but there were actually no Latin words. Old English is built off of Anglo-Saxon, so that's kind of the where it comes from is Anglo-Saxon English, Anglo-Saxon English, Old English, and then da 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 da. So then there's Middle English, which actually we're going to be talking about a lot more when we get to lecture on the lecture on chapter 3. So at the very end of this module, why that's important. And then 1500 onwards is Modern English. And so that's, of course, the language that we speak and the language that the vocabulary for which we are going to be focused. And so, in particular, in this class, we're going to be looking not just at modern English, but at the borrowed words. We're not focusing on Anglo-Saxon words, um, which were called native words, just because there's not a lot of there. But if by we're hoping that by understanding the borrowed words, which are built off of French and Latin and Greek, that we can kind of build our vocabulary. But first, because the book included this, and some of us are literature humanities people, and more of us should be, it's such an important thing to do. Anyhow, so the book includes this poem as an example of Middle English. We've kind of passed over Middle English very quickly in the introductory lecture. So I thought I would include this poem, and I thought, oh yeah, I'll just read it in my Middle English accent, which is a terrible Scottishy accent. But as I'm sitting here looking at my Zoom camera, I realize that I cannot do it. But so if you do this by yourself at home without the camera on, reading it aloud kind of helps you understand what this poem is. The World's Joy by Anonymous, circa 1300 CE. So this line here is like, winter wakeneth all my care. So this is pretty straightforward. Winter wakens. It has the eth ending. All here is just shorter. That's the same word as all, just shorter. Now this leaves waxeth bare. So in the second line, this now is RNOW, so just a change in letters. This and leaves, these should match each other. So we would say these leaves, these leaves. So we see here we don't have quite the noun adjective agreement that we would in English. And this lewes is a little more, it doesn't, it's shorter. For the reasons for that we can talk about later. Waxeth bare. Oft I psych and mourn sar. So psych here is sigh. This will eventually turn into the word S-I-G-H. And that's 100% because of the Norman invasion, because of French coming in. Psych is a Anglo-Saxon word. Sigh is French working on that word. Ant is and, mourn, sar. I actually completely forgot what sar is. I don't think our book even tells us. Um, in this other line, when hit cometh in my thought. So hit here is it. We just lose that aspiration. When it comes into my thought, into my thinking of this world's joy. So here we see just a different form of the possessive. We would have world apostrophe F, joy of the world, but in Old English and the Middle English, this was the genitive case. So that's how they did that. Of this world's joy, joy here is spelled quite differently. We simplify it. How hit goth all to naught. Here, how, H-O-W in modern English. Here's hit again. Those are the same, it with an H. Goth is got, how it, or probably we would say came, right? We wouldn't say how it got all to naught. We would say how it came all to naught. But here's all again, which we see here in the beginning, just shorter letter. Two is two. And then not here is nothing, how it all came to nothing. So we add an ing and modern. So you can see kind of the roots of modern English here. And so what a great opportunity to read this poem now. And then theoretically, by the end of the course, we're going to be able to see why all those words changed or why some of them changed in the ways that they did. All right, so now let's talk about more practically speaking. These are the terms that you really need to know. They're going to be really useful just in terms of your life, actually. So a suffix. We're going to be learning a lot of suffixes. A suffix is like a combination of letters. It's not a word by itself, but it's a combination of letters that we attach to the end of a word. So the suff is from sub, which means after or under, and then fingo means fix, attached to. So suffix literally means attached underneath, but a suffix is always at the end of the word. It's letters at the end of the word. So if you take the word asynchronous, which all of us hopefully know since we're not in a lecture together, and I'm recording this in deep in the heart of December, and I hope you all are having a fun time away from school. Anyhow, so asynchronous, the OUS here, that is the suffix. Technically, as our book points out, it means full of. So if we're talking about this word literally, it would be full of no together time. Full of no together time would be the very literal translation of asynchronous. But another way of looking at the us is rather than always thinking of it as means full of, it just turns asynchron, not together time into an adjective. It is the quality of not being together. So yeah, so that's the suffix. And we're going to see us all over the place. It's one of the first suffixes we use, and it's going to just be all over the place. So a prefix is just the opposite of a suffix. It's something attached at the beginning of the word. It's a combination of letters or a letter attached at the beginning of a word. And so in asynchronous, we have two separate prefixes, which is very common and it's a fun challenge. So a by itself is what's called an alpha privative, and it just negates the word. Here it's actually probably just negating soon, but so it's negating the sense of the word. That's what the A is doing by itself. And then the syn, S-Y-N, is actually coming from sum. It's S-U-M in Latin and Greek. But so syn, S-Y-N, just means together. So a syn, not together. So those are our prefixes. And then, so here's where the book and I disagree. The book calls what I am calling a root, and we're going to see this in the next slide, calls it a stem. But so the root or the stem is the heart of the word. It's the word that actually signifies meaning. So us, a, sin, they don't actually signify anything. I mean, they just work in relation to the root. The root itself is what has the meaning of the word. It doesn't mean that it's a complete word. And in fact, what we're going to be doing is looking at roots, which are just units of letters that signify, but don't stand in as words by themselves. So in the word asynchronous, here, right here in the middle, chron, chron, that's the root. That is coming from the Greek word chronos, which means time. That's word meaning time. And in particular, in Greek, it means the time that moves forward. There's another word that hopefully we'll get to talk about meaning time. That's actually much more exciting, but we'll worry about that in the second half of the course. So, but by knowing that the root chron means time, you not only can understand, of course, what asynchronous means, but a series of other words built off of the word chron. So chronology, the logic of time, right? Chronometer, the measure of time. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be learning all of those prefix, suffix, root, and then we're going to be putting them together to see what they can create. So this is where I was talking about before. I use the word root. That's just how I learned this sort of thing. Our book uses the word stem. They are interchangeable as far as we're concerned for this class. I personally prefer root. The book obviously prefers stem. They're both, of course, plant metaphors, so you could argue it either way. So as long as you know that those are the same thing, knowing me, I will probably ultimately be mind controlled by the book into saying stem more than root, but both are fine. And so if that's a real problem for you, if you're like it's driving me crazy, just reach out to me and I'll try to be more consistent one way or the other moving forward in the subsequent modules. All right. So that's where we're going to be working. That is the majority of the work in this class. Um, One other thing that this book offers, because this book was published, I believe, in 2007. And in 2007, as I note, there was the internet, but it was not like it is now. I'm assuming there was Google, but it might have been like at that same period where like Google and Ask Jeeves and Bing were all fighting with each other. There's definitely no AI. There was nothing amazing. So when this book was published, people still really used dictionaries. And actually, I took a class that was very similar to this when I was an undergraduate in the late 90s, late 1990s, the late 20th century. And half the class was using the dictionary and understanding how to read a dictionary entry. There is a lot of value to that. And if you are interested in that, if that's something you're interested in, I would highly recommend it. I'd be happy to sit down and talk to you about it. The book, I think, is just useful in how to read a dictionary, how to read an old-fashioned dictionary. And if you're looking to invest in a dictionary, the American Heritage Dictionary of the English language is amazing. I think it's on the fifth edition. Yeah. It's beautiful. It has pictures. It has all of the words. It's wonderful. It's not that expensive. I think you can get one for under $100. And it's a great book if you're a dictionary person. And of course, there will always be need for a dictionary somewhere. However, I suspect, and I think this is actually this is what I do. I think this is still a really good skill. I suspect that most of us will be using online resources, whether it be Google, whether it be, Google Gemini or whatever we're using these days. And that's completely great. Like, I don't want to discourage you. I would highly encourage you to do that. So because I think that that's a focus, I would like to show you the best way to do it for this class because I think most of us will be consulting the internet for our dictionary needs. I want to point you in the direction of the Oxford English Dictionary online. Now, the Oxford English Dictionary in physical format it takes up a library shelf. I think it's like at least 10 volumes. It's huge. It's very big. SDSU subscribes to this book online, and it is an amazing resource. Like there's just so much good stuff there. So I want to try to see if I can escape this lecture. Yeah, so what you will do to look at the OED online is you can just go, sorry, let me see if I can make this bigger. No, I can't. I'm sure it'll be fine. So you go to the SDSU website and you can just search, OED online. I think it's the second entry that comes up. Oh, no, it's first. Great. So it says database, Oxford English Dictionary, and you can just, I think, click on this link and it'll take you right there. Nope. No. Why would it not make you click another link? So hopefully this will work. It takes a minute because the library has to actually log in to the system, which is it's kind of a funny way around. So you know that you're in the system because you're signed in as San Diego State here, right? So here, once you get in, and you can do this, if you're on campus, it'll be fine. I think if otherwise you need a VPN. But so, and this is just the ideal way. Like there's tons of other ways to find words. So let's say you wanted to look up, the word asynchronous. So you can type it in here. And so this is the dictionary entry that comes up, and and nicely right from the jump, it tells you the first time this word was ever used was in 1737. And so you can click on the entry. And so rather than a bunch of abbreviations, which is what you would find in a physical dictionary, and so what our book is teaching you how to understand, you have it all kind of split out here. It's so here's our word. It tells us that it's an adjective. It tells us the last time this word was revised. Now, 2010 seems surprising to me. I'm surprised it changed during COVID times, but because they're constantly updating it. That's the magic of the OED. It's always going to pop you first into the meaning and use. But what's interesting about this is it will always start with the first use of the word, well, not always, but most of the time. So here it gives us our meaning, not synchronous, not existing or occurring at the same time, not coinciding in time, originally only used in medical contexts. And so you can understand this, right? You don't need me to walk you through this because it just makes sense. It's in layman's terms. Whereas in a dictionary, there would be a ton of abbreviations of these things. And then what it does here, this is the use section in this box. It shows all of like the major places. We're going to eventually talk about the word locus classicus. It's going to look at kind of the major places this word was used. And it'll go all the way to, normal time. And then it will give you other, here's what asynchronous means in electrical engineering specifically. Here's what it means in computing specifically. So it'll give you, but it's very clearly labeled how the word is being used. So that's great. Very nice. The other part that you might be interested in that I always find really interesting is the etymology. So that's going to tell you where the word is coming from. So this here, the book might have some helpful points, but also we're going to be learning all these terms in class. So as I mentioned, it's got an alpha prefix. And then if you hover on it, it'll tell you what that prefix mean. And then it'll take you to synchronous. So it does not separate out the suffixes. It gives you syn, chronous all together. But if you keep, sorry, I had lunch recently. And then if you click on this and then go to the etymology of synchronous, it will break it down even further. So late Latin synchronous, it'll give you the Greeks. There's our prefix, there's chronos, there's suffix. So I would highly recommend like just messing around with this. Like it's very easy. There's no there's no cost to it, and it can be really, really interesting if that's the sort of thing you like spending your time doing. Okay, so I am going to, oh, and I will make sure to have a link to the OED on our Canvas page. So, all right, that was a very long lecture one. So I'm going to end it here. But so come back for lecture two when we're going to really dig into some of those words in chapter one. Oh, I forgot how to do this smoothly.